Mike.
I'm Brad.
And this is Ministry Chemistry.
Here we go.
Welcome back to another episode of Ministry Chemistry with your favorite ministry chemists, us. Hello.
Us.
Are you not going to say hi?
Hi. I know. I so wanted to do the Seinfeld hello, and I was like, I just don't know if I don't know if I can pull it off right now. Hello.
It's either the voice or me, Jerry.
Hello.
And he chooses the voice, and it's so good.
It's so good. The best is like he just they end the show with him knocking on the door.
So good. It's so good. Anyway, today we are having a very interesting conversation, which I don't think we've even skirted the issues of.
I don't think so.
In the past 50-some episodes that we've done together, because we have.
Can you believe it?
So exciting. Gosh, I love you guys.
Most
Today
days,
we're going to talk we're going to talk a little bit about some marriage, a little bit about some singleness, a little bit about how all that gets wrapped up in a faith-based context, a church, expectations, things like this. So I thought, to ease us into the conversation, we would each share one of the best dates we've ever been on. You know me, I don't like singular favorites, so I'm not going to say what's the best, but what's one of the best dates you've ever been on in your life?
You have to go first.
Me?
Yeah, go first.
Oh, I can totally do this. Okay.
Yeah, do it.
Well, it's a tie between two.
No,
So
that's okay.
one of them, it was on like a Labor Day weekend, so we had the whole Monday off, and he said, I'm going to pick you up, plan the whole day to be free. I have things for us to do all day. And I was like, okay, like that's a big trust step for me. Like, all right, here we go. I hope this doesn't suck. That's right. I'm an optimist, just so you know. But it was great. It was a scavenger hunt around the city where we lived at the time. And he had all these envelopes with clues in them. And once I figured out the next clue, we'd go to that place and he'd say why that was important, like in his life or his story or the meaning it was. In his
So
family.
it was all about him.
It wasn't. I got to learn about him. I got to learn the city more. It was very thoughtful. So
Then they didn't have to talk at dinner.
yeah, and at dinner we just sat in silence and reflected on the day because I'm such a quiet person that's exactly.
And the second?
The second one I think about almost every time I go out to eat because this guy taught me the value of just taking in the environment of wherever you are. And so we went on this date. We went to one of his favorite restaurants and we sat down and I immediately opened my menu and started looking at the menu and I noticed he wasn't. And so I sat mine down. I said, we're eating here, right? And he goes, oh yeah, I just, my grandpa once taught me that you just need to sit down and kind of take in where you are. And if there's a story on the back of the menu, you should read it because people have invested their lives into this place where you are. And so he's like, I just like to, take my time and not rush through. And I was like, I love that. So that wasn't more the whole date was great.
I'm having the spaghetti.
But that moment was really great. So
That's really good. I like that.
yeah.
Because Jess and I have complained before, like, we're fast eaters. So, like, we'll go out to a nice dinner where you're supposed to sit down and take your time.
Mm-hmm.
And, 35 minutes later,
You're
we're
done and
paying
out.
the bill and
Jeez.
walking out. It's like, we should have dragged this out a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's really good. I
So-
like that.
I learned it's a lesson that has stayed with me for now over 10 years, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you guys?
Go ahead.
Best date.
One of.
Are you obligated to say your wife?
I'm
I
not
was gonna free you
obligated
from that.
to. I'm not obligated to, but August 13th is a good date.
All right, Miss Congeniality. It's not too hot. It's not too cold.
So I'll do two as well. Not unfortunately, since I'm not obligated to say my wife, they actually are both my wife. But the first one was when it was probably a month after we started dating, was my birthday, and she put together this another scavenger hunt kind of thing that her entire floor from her dorm was involved with.
Aww.
And it was videotaped. So part of it was I had to read a children's story to her floor, and then there was stuff that had to happen really all over town, and it ended up at dinner with her someplace. I don't even remember.
That's so fun.
It was fun. It was certainly interactive. The second was probably our first date, and I always get people to stop and want to know more because our first date lasted 2 days.
Stop. Tell us more.
No, that's it.
Oh.
We went out to dinner. Then we went to a party that was on campus. Then we went back to my apartment with 5 other guys that I was living with. We watched a movie. I dropped her off at her dorm at 4:30 in the morning, but I picked her up an hour and a half later, and we spent the day at Kings Island.
Oh, wow.
So it was a 2-day date, and been together ever since.
So she really liked you.
Wow. Either that or she
really liked Kings Island.
Yeah. She actually hated it. She turned the most beautiful shade of green after one of those roller coasters.
And that's when you knew.
I knew right away, but
Oh.
I had to convince her. So,
Mike?
ta-da.
Brad just reminded me of that song that starts with the girl throwing up in the toilet and he's holding her hair. And it's like everyone holds it up as like, oh, this is such a beautiful song. I'm like, she's throwing up.
What song?
But you're my guy.
I can't remember.
You need to remember.
I can't remember the name of it or even how it goes or the rhythm of the song or anything. But the whole basis of the song is he's holding her hair while she's throwing up. I'm like, how is this romantic?
Yeah, I know.
Anyway. So I'll do 2 just in the spirit of things, but I'll make one not my wife, okay?
Well, okay. You're the one that has to go home to her tonight.
All right, first one is my wife, first date. And yeah, it was just, I don't believe in like love at first sight or first date, but I think after that first date, I was like, I could make this a permanent thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had met. And I was a total D-bag when we first met.
Okay.
And I was a terrible person. That was pre-Jesus. And like 2 weeks went by, and then she took a shot and called me and was like, hey, do you want to hang out? We were both driving back to Columbus from after visiting our family for Christmas. And I was
she called you.
She did. She called me because, I had put the ball in her court. Like we met and then I kind of pursued and she kind of blew me off because I wasn't very nice the night that we met. But anyway, she was, I guess, divine intervention. She was like, yeah, maybe I'll give him another shot to not be, a D-bag. So I appreciated that. And she called me and was like, you want to hang out? And I was like, I would love to. I'm like, but I'm driving back to Columbus, and I basically have to flip my suitcase and get ready to go out of town tomorrow. So we can totally hang out, but as long as it's like low key. And she's like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And I was like, you mind if I like come in my pajamas, my sweatpants? She was like, that sounds awesome. So I went to her place and I picked her up, and I literally had on sweatpants and like, a sweatshirt, and she comes out in like her flannel pajama pants. And we went to Roosters, and we had some wings and nachos, and we went back to her place and watched Iron Man because she had gotten the Iron Man DVD for Christmas.
Yes, that's so great.
We just chilled, and
we
didn't talk a lot.
Great movie, great food.
Which is funny because people know me from the show, but they don't know my wife. We're both
talkers,
very big talkers.
Oh,
we
Jess
talk
can
a
talk.
lot.
Yeah.
So, we talked during dinner, but we literally just kind of chilled on the couch and watched a movie. And it just showed me like, we don't have to be doing something like this adventurous scavenger hunt to enjoy each other's company.
Mm-hmm. Shut it, Mike.
My second one, and this is like purely fun. So my best friend, sort of end of high school, first year of college, we're hanging out one day. His girlfriend calls him, and his girlfriend's like, hey, my best friend's prom date just dumped her, and it's 2 weeks before prom. And she's like, do you think Mike would take her to the prom?
It's like
Or
Ross and Rachel.
Go to the prom with
It's
her.
like Ross and Rachel.
And he asked, he's like, puts his girlfriend on hold. He's like, hey, Mike, will you go to a prom with, my girlfriend's best friend? I was like, sure, why not? So I went. There was no obligation. We weren't dating. We had never been on a date. I was literally just her plus one for prom. And it was the most fun that I'd had, as a teenager on a date.
That's
I was
awesome.
like, because we both we danced with everyone at the prom. And, we danced together some, but we hung out. We talked to other people. We weren't married to each other at the prom.
Yeah. You just got to have some fun.
Yeah. And it was a blast. It
but
was
a guaranteed buddy.
It was a date, we dressed, we color coordinated and took pictures and all that jazz. So I would consider that a date.
When there was a slow song, you found each other.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We danced with everyone. It was awesome. It was fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. I think it's important to date well, even beyond marriage. Would you agree? Do you guys still date your wives?
Yes.
I sure try to.
Yeah.
Oh, we just got into a therapy session.
I know. This is going to be so fun. What does it look like differently other than you're married versus not married? But do you plan differently? Do you take her for granted, or do you know her better?
Yes.
All of
the
it?
above. For us, we don't go out a lot. But when we do, it's typically the same. We live the same date over and over again.
It's like Groundhog Day every day in your world.
It's kind of like that, but it's usually warmer. We go out for dinner, and then we go to the store. A store of some kind. It's pretty boring.
Okay.
We're old married people.
But do you love it?
I love her.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter where you are.
No. Walks are a date for us. I mean,
one of the hard parts for Jess and I, and we have to combat this, mentally take note and combat it, is with two toddlers, there's a lot of noise in the house. It can be chaotic. So when we make a point to take a kid-free night and go out on our own, not getting lost in silence, because you don't get to have that enough with two toddlers in the house. Because we're talkers, and we want to talk to each other and we want to enjoy each other's company. But usually, a half-hour ride to a restaurant is pretty quiet. I get a little quieter in the car. It's just a thing. I kind of zone out.
Do you hear that?
And Jess, Jess is better at that, combating that. She's like, you want to talk or whatever. But for me, I'm like, the sound of silence is beautiful right now.
I've not heard someone actually say that. I've heard more the stories of we try to have conversations that don't revolve around our kids, our schedule, and our work. As those are important, but they seem to be the common topics that always have to be talked about. So I know more couples that try to talk about other things or enjoy talking about other things.
We don't talk very much in the car at all. It was several years ago, I was going on a mission trip down to New Orleans, and we drove down. So I forget, 13 hours or something like that. And I was in a car with a talker. And when we got down there, everybody said, "How was your ride?" And I said, "I think I heard more words in that car ride than in the 13 years of our marriage." I was in shock because we just don't talk a lot in the car.
That's interesting. So you might be wondering why we're even having these conversations today. And it's primarily because we thought a good time to talk about singleness and marriage and the church, particularly the Western church, because that's the one that we're in. We're in the American church and American versions of Christianity. And it seemed like spring is in the air. Flowers are blooming. Why don't we talk about this thing that we don't really talk about a lot? If you've listened to our podcast for any amount of time, you've probably picked up on the fact that Brad is married to the beautiful Jill, Mike is married to the beautiful Jess, and I get to do life just with me for the most part in terms of marriage. I'm not married, but I have a great tribe of people that I love, family and friends.
Initially you made it sound much sadder than it actually is.
Me? Oh, I'm not sad about it.
Well, I'm glad, but I think
Yeah.
some people are like, oh, poor Renee.
That's okay. And if they're a single guy, they should say, "Oh, poor Renee, I should know her," and then they could like get in touch with me. That'd be fine.
Tried to beat my best 2 dates.
But I will say a soapbox that, that's
You have set a standard,
Yeah.
pretty high
I
standard.
have. That's
Yeah.
great. A soapbox that I can get on is that I believe that the church today does a really good job of making marriage an idol and an end goal. And I hope that I would say that even if I was married, because I think it is something overlooked in conversation, and it has created a lot of difficulties with young adult men, young adult women, trying to find their place in this world if they haven't found a person to share this world with yet. And I'm curious what your guys' perspective is on that.
Well, I think the church feels limited in its capacity to deal with certain things, and we've talked about some of those certain things. So right now, I feel like the church's only method of dealing with singleness, and that's a bad
Dealing
word to
with.
use.
Yeah,
That's a
no.
bad word to use.
It's okay.
It is. I just don't know what other word to attach to it, and that's probably
It's kinder than some.
that's
so.
probably the way the church would say it.
Yep.
Dealing with singleness.
What do we do with this?
Right. Is here's a singles group.
Yep.
And
that can go from age 20 to 37.
And I wonder if there's this subconscious thought of, this will become a matchmaker group.
Absolutely is the thought. And don't let anyone lie to you. It's the thought of everyone who goes to the singles group too.
Yeah.
I just want to meet other people like me. Baloney. You want to meet someone that you can get with.
Side note, I don't know if this is true or not, but maybe you told me this, but Christian Mingle is owned by a porn distributor.
Oh, I didn't tell you that. That's news to me.
Yeah. I've heard
No
that before.
kidding.
I don't know if that's true. Don't quote me on that. I may have just spread a rumor.
You totally did to at least 70 people that listen to us.
But why wouldn't it be true? Look it up. I don't know. Maybe I should
why
have looked it
wouldn't
up.
it be true? Why would it? Wow, that's crazy.
That's
My
big-
mind blown is for just a minute.
Hey, there's big money in singles matchmaking.
Yes,
Yeah, there is.
Absolutely is.
Yeah. So I want to throw this back at you.
Great.
What, as a single person in the church, what is a better way for the church to approach and hold up singleness while also celebrating marriage? Because they're not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not mutually exclusive. And I'm really glad you said that, because I am not someone who disparages marriage. I love marriage and the gift of marriage, and I definitely believe it is the most, or one of the most, sanctifying relationships that exist on earth. I mean, people in marriages are faced with their own insecurities and vulnerabilities on a daily basis in front of somebody else. There's constant accountability in a right marriage, right? There's constant love too, and grace, and it's the art of doing life together and not in a vacuum. And so I'm a big fan of marriage. Saying all that, don't people not in marriages also need those things? A constant source of grace and love, accountability, spaces to be vulnerable, people to do life with, for no other reason than we were made to be relational and in community. And so I think if a church wants to quote unquote reach people who are single, or minister to them, or just be places where people who aren't married can go, provide the same thing that you would if someone was married. The difference is I don't come with a buddy. I don't come with a husband. And if I do come with a husband, there will be maybe different topics that he and I need to talk about in the context of community or the church than a single person. So that could be provided, but there are things that a single person needs to talk about as well. Does that answer your question, or does that make it even more gray?
No. I just have a question swirling in my mind. Brad, did you have something that you were
I have
thinking
a
about?
lot of different things swirling in my mind. I'm trying to narrow it down. I get that. I'll speak in our context. We have a young. young marrieds group
Mm-hmm.
that meets. They all have kids generally. And that's kind of 25 to, I think they go 25 to 45.
Which, P.S., that's a vast range.
Yeah.
Of life stage.
Yeah. It tends to be on the younger side of that one.
So when I make the joke that the single groups are for like 22s to 37s, I said that tongue in cheek because a 37-year-old is dealing with life in a completely different way than a 22-year-old.
They should.
And
be.
they should. So, sorry, continue.
They're still living in their parents' basement. But we have a group that's just aged above that. That is 45 to 65. And most of those people are married, but we also have plenty of singles that are a part of that. And other than the younger group that seems to be targeted more towards young families, I don't know that we have anything that's set up just for marrieds or just for singles. The young adult group that I lead is kind of 18 to 25, and we've had some people get married while they're still in that age group and they've left just because they basically don't have anything in common with everybody else. But they could still be a part of the group if they wanted to. So it's not a segregated thing. Okay, now you're married, you can't play with us. Or vice versa. So at least in our context, that's the way things have worked. But it seems as though those groups gravitate towards themselves rather than it actually being set up that way. Maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting that the segregation is even titled by marital status. It's not just a group of 20-somethings or 30-somethings or 40-somethings getting together. It's the singles and the marrieds.
Yeah.
So we're even using phraseology that's separationist.
Is that any different than age separation or interest separation or gender separation as far as laying out small groups? I mean, we have men's group, we have women's group. It's essentially basing a group off a common denominator.
That's right. And so if the point of the group is to hone in on that common denominator for a reason, then no, there's nothing wrong with that. If the point of the group is to be community, then why would you label the relational status of people? So you're going to teach 7th and 8th graders differently than you're going to teach 9th through 12th graders, differently than you're going to teach 45 to 50-year-olds because of a lot of reasons, right? Are you going to teach a 20-something single something different than a married something single? And if so, what is that? That's when you need maybe the separation. Otherwise, if it's just a community group or a let's get together and do stuff group, why has it got to be singles and marrieds alike? Why do you got to call it out?
Well, I don't disagree with you. I think there's value in age-based ministry and even
gender-based ministry.
To some degree, gender-based ministry.
Sure.
For sure. Because, I've seen it through our guys group. There's things that we've talked about that we would never talk about with women in the room. There's no way.
Well,
but it's fruitful. It's good conversation. It's just there's a different level of transparency.
Sure.
When it's just a bunch of guys or just a bunch of girls.
And don't hear me say there's not value in a group that's just for married couples, and that there's not value in a group that's for people in adulthood who are not married. My point is, make it clear as to why the group exists.
The purpose.
The purpose of the group. And if there's no reason to distinguish singled from married to in a relationship, then don't do it. Don't stand up from the pulpit and say, and this group's for anyone married or single. This group's for anyone. Period.
Well, I was getting at, I see the value in age-based and somewhat common denominator, but I've also seen the value of intermixing. Like even
intergenerational
ages.
groups. Yes.
Yeah, there's great value in that. There's great value in that. Pouring in and getting out, from a group of 20-somethings with toddlers, sharing a Bible study with a group of seniors with grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
they can both learn from each other.
Absolutely.
And there's value in that.
And I think where the difference lies, and going back to the reason we're even having this conversation, is if the thesis is marriage has become an idol, an end goal, something we all should strive towards, that's where the struggle is. Because when you do intergenerational ministry, eventually, hopefully, a 15-year-old will become 20 and will become 25 and will become 50 and 75. So to have someone in their life who is already at that life stage who can say, hey, over the next 10 years, this is going to make this pathway a bit better for you, a bit, let me teach you that. Let me share about my 25-year-old experience. So at 15, you can be like, oh, okay, that's where I'm headed, or, oh, okay, that's where I could head, right? When you do an intermixed group of singles and marrieds, I think you just have to be really thoughtful that some of those folks who are single may never be married. And what the church doesn't say is, and that's okay.
Well, is there a difference? Let me back up for a second. I heard someone say once, talking about couples who have kids and those who don't, that and you'll I can't remember, you'll know the theater language. He purchased from a theater, but he talks about people who don't have kids are only seeing life in 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional versus 4-dimensional. He's talking about there's a missing element to life that you never. Could the same be said for marriage? And can the church approach that and, hey, this is something that we think bears a lot of fruit. So we would love to see everyone who's single find a lifetime companion because we think there's fruit and there's value and there's a different dimension to life in sharing that. But we're not going to feel sorry for you until you reach that point.
Yeah.
So my brain goes into a lot of directions. So let's see if I can do this well. One, absolutely have that conversation. Teach and share the truth, which is there is a lot of fruit and goodness and gifts out of marriage. Recognize there's a lot of fruit and gifts and goodness out of being single as well. One does not take a higher ranking in life experience than the other. I say that because I can say the second thing. I have companions in my life. They're not marital companions, but if we take something out of, let's take financial accountability. In a marriage, there are conversations all the time, right? Who's spending what? How's our money? Who's in charge of the checkbook? It's probably the source of most divorces in the country, whether you're a Christian or not, is money problems, right?
Sex and marriage.
Guess what?
Sex and money.
Sex and money. Guess what I still need? I still need someone to help me with my finances. Guess who I have in my life? Family and friends who do that. That's not exclusive and isolated to married couples, the problems or the positives of money management. And so, yes, marriage is good and bears fruit. Singleness has its upsides too. Now, for those listening that don't know this, Brad and Mike know this, I'm not single by choice, but I am single, right? So my heart has always been maybe to meet someone and be able to say, let's do this life together forever. That would be so fun. The way my journey has gone, that has not happened yet. So in that, I've had to learn and lean a lot from and on Jesus to say, what is the ultimate of life? Is it to find that one who is my heart's desire and get married and have kids? And
that's a whole other conversation right there.
But it's the problem. It's the problem. Because at the end of the day, if it's just you and your spouse, some churches would say, you and your spouse and Jesus, that's all you need. Other churches will say, it's just Jesus, but they're going home to a wife or a husband at night. And if it's truly just Jesus, you got to check your heart on that.
Well, there's a bit of a paradigm in Scripture between, we've talked about this, I think, before on the show, God's ideal for creation. And I think we see that play out in the first 2 chapters of Genesis. God created male and female to be joined together as one flesh.
Sure.
I mean, that's God's ideal. But then you have Paul talking about, if you're single, regardless of the circumstances of that, he's kind of talking to widowers and stuff like that. But remain that way as much as it's within your capacity to not sin, to do so.
Right.
So sometimes it's a struggle to mesh those two things.
Absolutely.
I don't think Paul is going against God's ideal for humanity. He's speaking into what's best for that context. But do you know what I'm saying? Like that's a bit of a opposite. That reads like two opposite ends of a pendulum.
It does, and it doesn't, because to say it's opposite ends of the pendulum means there's an inconsistency, and I'm not gonna give that credence because of this. Who's the church called to care for by Jesus?
Everyone.
Yes, but specifically widows and orphans. Essentially, specifically, singles and children without parents. So a family structure isn't intact. The church needs to care for them. So the church needs to come alongside those without some of these ideal relational situations and care for and be there for. I'm going to push a little. I think the church cares more about keeping marriages intact than helping singles along their struggles of journey. Now, does the church need to come alongside and help marriages stay in? Yes.
Yeah,
Please don't hear.
It's an either or.
It's not an either or. But right now, the balance is so unequal.
Well, I think that we see more marriages breaking up. So they're single people, but they're not necessarily losing a part of themselves, right? They're whole in and of themselves. But when you're joined together and you're seeing separation happen and all that falls apart from there, it's almost like a triage unit. We're trying to focus there because we don't want that to happen.
Sure.
Yes, we need to care for singles. We need to lift them up and build them up and be a part of them, walk with them. But I mean, we're hemorrhaging over here, and we need to focus. Possibly.
And we've been saying singles and marrieds, and I too, right? We've been titling folks. But at the crux of every matter is an individual's heart. Why did that marriage fall apart? Did the man or did the woman themselves as an individual need some extra care, attention, and love or grace? Maybe not even from their spouse, but from people rallying around them. And this would take us into a whole nother episode, which I know we're going to do one day, which is, for me, at the crux of this, is the church has not highlighted nearly enough friendship and the need, whether you're married or single, for close community and relationships that we know as deep spiritual Christ-following friendships. So, Mike, to your point, in your men's group, you talk about things that you might not talk about with women in the room. Why? Because you're surrounded by close friends. Jesus wasn't married. If that's the ideal context of relationship for us to live in, he didn't meet it when he was on earth. Why? I think that's something to be pondered. But he was surrounded by close friends, that there was physical affection exchanged. And anyone who's struggling with that, read your Gospels. There was physical affection exchange. There was emotional vulnerability exchanged. There was intellectual conversation exchanged. All the things. And he wasn't married. Which means, and this is the cliffhanger of the week, sex isn't necessary for a fulfilling life on earth. Whoa, she said it. What? But God created it, and it's good, and it's a gift. So until next time, listeners. We're going to leave you with this. What do you think about singleness and marriage? Do you place either one on a pedestal or pity either one? How are you in your married or single life? Do you have friends surrounding you? Do you have community? Are you experiencing unconditional love and grace and a safe space to be vulnerable before our Lord and before other followers of him? Or is that something that you need in your life? For this abrupt ending, you're welcome. And this is Renee.
This is hurting Mike right now.
Yep. So much.
So much.
And Brad.
We'll talk to you next time.